What people call black leftists understood this, they would realize that if they help the white left into power, the white left is going to do them in. Now, I'm not less of a socialist because I'm saying this, but I'm more of an African nationalist and a Pan-Africanist because I'm saying this. Because I take my socialism from African social living and not from Karl Marx. I take mine straight from the originators of it, who originated it before the first European wore a shoe or lived in a house that had a window. So I know there's nothing new about it. The Africans had it all along. So I go to the original instead of the carbon copies created in Europe. Now, there are a whole lot of Africans today who don't understand that. Now, my point is that once the Romans became Christians, they accepted it as a political apparatus, but the spirituality of it eluded them completely. Where are they now in history? The conference at Nicaea has already occurred, several conferences. That's behind a few hundred years now or more. The Romans, out of their weakness, you must separate the political Roman Empire from the Holy Roman Empire. The political Roman Empire is dead. When the political Roman Empire started to weaken, they began to have African emperors, the most colorful being Septimius Severus, and one of the last being Clarke. And Septimius Severus is noted for he was also the governor of England, in addition to being governor, emperor of Rome. All right, he was from the political Holy Roman Empire. Political Roman Empire. Now, the Holy Roman Empire has had, at this point, 3 African popes. Tertullian being a noted one. There were 3. And Tertullian wouldn't be popular today because he's really one of the first to say, vanity, vanity, thy name is woman. So the holy sinner, the greatest writer of the church has had is behind us now. I mean, St. Augustine. St. Augustine, really, who gave the church its literature, also African, gave it its being, has lived and practically died by now. Bishop of Hippo. He has written far more than the world knows. People know about his City of God and his Confessions. But there was so much of his writing that has not come down to us that is available in text and in documents. But he has lived and practically died by this point. At this point, my main point is that the African contribution to the church has been made, and Augustine looks back at what these Europeans have done to Christianity. He said, makes him laugh, especially the conference at Nicaea. These people don't understand Christianity. Now, the fight between Byzantium and Rome over the dominance of the church has literally wrecked the church. And this mismanagement and disenchantment now would cause a camel boy. Now, because you can't read, that doesn't mean you have no wisdom. Most of the people of that period couldn't read. That don't mean they're stupid. To begin to talk to other camel boys, Finally, he began to rise up in his profession, and his uncle began to give him a little leeway. He was working for his uncle in the trades, the caravan trades between Damascus and, and finally he marries a rich widow. This rich widow secures for him 2 Ethiopian tutors that the Encyclopedia of Islam mistakenly called slaves. They're not slaves. And Zayd bin Harith and Bilal. Bilal is the Prophet's first convert. And Zayd bin Harith is listed as the third. I'm at a loss to find out who was the second of the African converts. All right. Oh, now, this is the condition. The corruption of Christianity has reached a point for failing to find reform, to get reform. He began to send letters to the different heads of state, asking them to accept the new faith. And some of them laughed at it, some of them tapped the letter. The Emperor of China takes it seriously. He doesn't say, oh, it wasn't a big deal. He erects a mosque. Says, all right. One more religion don't mean nothing to him. He erects a beautiful new mosque in China. It's all right. I mean, it didn't seem to bother him. He accepted it. He gave it a chance. Anybody want to join it? Here's a mosque. You make no fuss. Fuss about it. A few accepted, a few didn't. And then he tell me, go to accept the faith, or go to pick up your sword, because I'm going to fight you, Now, Bilal accompanies the Prophet on his various missions. And he is looking for someone to call the faithful to prayer. Bilal becomes the first of the Muslim to call the faithful to prayer. And he has looked, and he did among the men of people of Arabia. He don't want to use bells or, Then he comes home one evening. Bilal is his steward and his mace carrier and gentle all-around man. And he tells Bilal his problems. Then he asks Bilal to see if he can say the call to prayer. And he said, why have I been looking all over Arabia when you have the sweetest voice in all the land? Now Bilal becomes the one to call the faithful to prayer. And he makes out of it a great art form. And even today, if you go to Senegal and listen when the faithful are being called to prayer, the Africans do it, and it is a concert. It is a concert piece. Then go to an Arab country and listen, almost like a bad bird singing off tone. They can't bring it off to this day. They can't bring off that song. The beauty of that song. There's no God but Allah, allies, It's repetitious, but it's the African who can take that repetition and infuse a spiritual beauty into it that you will not find in any other country, any other place in the world. Of course, in Libya, they just record an African voice and play it on record from the place. They get it that way. But Libya seems to be the only predominantly Arab country where the 5 prayers are called on time, and where you do see a degree of people moving toward the mosque to say the 5 prayers. In most Arab countries, the traffic keeps on, and nobody pays slightly attention to it. But in Senegal, a predominantly African country, when it comes time to say one of the 5 prayers, the traffic stops. And you could be going to have a baby, but the traffic stops. And my point is that whether I believe in it or not, it's just so beautiful to see so many black people doing something in unison. Right or wrong is of no significance. No significance. Just see them doing something together. It's a thing of joy. You notice one thing, generally, the men and the women are closer together in African countries than in Arab countries. And inasmuch as the prophet's first public act at a time when, because they are a desert people, when a woman had 2 girls, if the 3rd child was a girl, they either got rid of her or put her to death. Women protested this. He defended their right to keep the children. Now, inasmuch as the prophet defended their right to keep their children, one wonders why and how, over the years, systematically, Islam became predominantly a male chauvinistic religion. Here you have to separate Islam from Arabism. Maybe it was something about the desert, and maybe it was the belief that a woman needed protection. But very few women rose to high position in the Arab side of the religion. And I can name one woman head of state in the black side of it, who not only headed a state, but rode in the head of her army and commanded her armies in the field. 1500s, that's Elmina of Nigeria, in the state of Zara. I recently recommended that she be included among Budweiser's great queens of Africa. And I purposely supervised the writing of the copy in order to eliminate a whole lot of the misconceptions about her. And they are misconceptions and rumors. The rumor was, because she never married, is that she took a new lover each night, and if his performance wasn't adequate, she had him killed in the morning. There was no proof of this at all. And if that rumor got out, I guess half the male population in the world might disappear. Even stars don't perform at their best every night. So that wasn't an important thing anyway. The important thing was this strong woman defended northern, it wasn't Nigeria then, it was in the Hausa country, the state of Zara, defended her state and built walls of defense that still can be seen in this part of Nigeria. Defended her right as a woman without getting into the nonsense about liberation. Held her ground, defended her lineage, and left her mark on that territory of Africa until that part is a part of Nigeria that is literally called Elmina City. And she was a Muslim. And that did not happen any other place among Muslims for women. That did not happen. It surely did not happen any place among the Arabs. And the revolutionary African, especially revolutionary against colonialism, happened nearly always on that side, on the African side. That meant that the African accepted the religious side and the spirituality. That Islam said something to the African that it did not say to the Arab, and that it still says something to the African that it is not saying to the Arab. That if Islam is to be rescued and made the great spiritual and moral religion it was intended to be, instead of the political instrument for opportunists, it will be the African who will make it so. He has the capacity to make it so. And this is what we need to look at. Not to ignore the Arab at all, not to ignore the fact that it was from Arabia that the religion came out, swept over into North Africa, and had its rapid growth. All right, now, after this religion barely got underway, the Prophet had some difficulty, had to leave Medina, then literally had to fight his way back to Mecca. Bilal was with him all of the time, and so was Zayd bin Harith. Zayd bin Harith was the governor of the Prophet's tribe, the Quraysh, and he was married into the Prophet's family, one of the highest honors possible. And he is hailed as one of the great heroes of Islam in the Encyclopedia of Islam and other literatures of Islam. The literature of Islam writes about the great blacks, but they don't tell you they were black. And what we need to do is to do a little more research in the area of Arabia and the presence of so many Africans at the time. We need also to look at the number of African neglected heroes and Islam and bring them back to fore, bring them back into world consideration, and understand that Islam came into being so fast. It is literally a religion made from a composite religion, and the least original of the world's religions. It had to take something from Christianity, something from Judaism, something from Zoroastrianism. That is nothing that one needs to apologize for. And yet, it came into being at a time. It served a great purpose. And it had to turn to many places for haven and for shelter. On the advice of Zayd bin Harith and Bilal, some of the key followers were sent to Ethiopia for shelter while the trouble in Arabia blew over. The prophet said, "Go to Ethiopia, go to that land of righteousness where no one is wrong." This is the kind of reputation Ethiopia had among Muslims at the time it had been a Christian nation for over 300 years. Other people against the move went ahead and told the Ethiopians that these people were thieves. And when the Ethiopian king received them, he said that your message is not much different from the Christian message. And he received them and sheltered them until the difficulty blew over, and they went back and strengthened and got the faith well underway. Now, Bilal stayed with the prophet the rest of his life, and when the prophet was dying, he literally appointed Bilal as the next caliph, and he refused it. Now look what would have happened to the faith had Bilal became the next caliph after the prophet. It would have been a different religion altogether. But he refused the honor, but he did not call the prayers except 2 more times. After that, he called the prayers for Omar, the first caliph, and 1 time for a special meeting for the first caliph. And then he either went back to Ethiopia or he died. We know Zayd bin Harith died in a battle against the Byzantines. But these 2 Ethiopians had helped to lay the foundation and the strength for Islam. Islam now was ready to move out of Arabia over into North Africa, to move into the vacuum left by the confusion of the Romans and the mismanagement of Christianity. North Africa was in such a sad state that the people were ready to welcome almost anything with the disappear with the wreckage left by the Romans. So there was very little resistance. In a little while, the Muslim armies had swept across most of northern Africa. A little resistance from the Berbers. These are relatives of the Arabs who had arrived much earlier. And this resistance didn't last too long. When this resistance died down, Islam swept into the western Sudan and began to convert Africans. Now, Islam swept into the western Sudan. Understand me now, if you can visualize a map of Africa. They went down into West Africa, not to the coast, but inland away from the coast. That is called the Western Sudan, skirting the coast. And they converted a group of Africans. And these Africans became purists. So much purists that these Africans, after 50 years or so, came back into Morocco and told those who converted them, "You are not properly observing the faith. I'm purer than you are." Now you have to understand this, because Western Africa, the Western Sudan and Western Africans were converted by Islamized blacks. East Africa was converted by Arabs. Islamized blacks knew what part of African culture to leave intact in spite of Islam. You can see the difference to this day. And East Africa, converted by the Arabs, who had no respect for African culture then or now, they destroyed a lot of African culture. They married African women, and after 50 years, they had produced enough black-looking Arabs, and ultimately they would use them to go inland where the Arabs were not permitted to go and start the East African slave trade. Over 600 years before the European slave trade. And the Arab is the only aspect, a branch of Islam to use Islam as an aspect of slavery. Now the Africans who converted those in Western Sudan left the matrilineal system intact, meaning the lineage coming down through the female remained intact in Western Africa, while in Eastern Africa, the Arabs installed the patrilineal system, meaning the inheritance comes through the oldest son, and the lineage comes down through the male side of the family. It has wrecked the culture to this very day. It has confused the culture to this very day. Now, when they arrived in Egypt, they arrived at a culture that had been raped by foreigners for 1,000 years. They had no respect for it or understanding of it then. They have no respect for it or understanding for it now. The Arab traditionally has no respect for non-Arabic culture, and practically none for African culture in other parts of Africa. And this is the basic drawback and the basic difference between Arabs spreading Islam and Africans spreading Islam. African Islam is basically different from Arab Islam. Arab Islam is a form of Arab supremacy and condescension. Just like white Christianity is a form of white condescension. They think they're doing you a favor to let you in their church. The church becomes their private property, just like the Arabs think they're doing you a favor when you come into one of the mosques. And if you go to Mecca and see the discrimination against colors, different colors, you will find that out is that even in Mecca, there is color discrimination. And they'll look you straight in the eye and deny the whole thing. All right, now, they're in Egypt, but out of the Western Sudan would come a great general, Tarak Ben Zad, or Jabral Tarak. He would discover a weakness in Spain fighting the Goths and the Visigoths, and the Vandals fighting among themselves. The dissident element in Spain would do something white people rarely ever do. They would sneak across into Africa and tell the Africans how weak the whites are, and said they are so weak, if you want to conquer them, it's an easy thing to do. Jabral would send a testing army about 10,000 just to test their lines. You find it is easy. Then later, he would send 60,000. He would take Spain. Now this is purely an African conquest. You are not dealing with the Arab conquest of Spain at first, because the Arabs were not there at first. The initial conquest of Spain was African, not Arab. That army came from the Senegamia, now Senegal, and parts of what is now Mauritania. And when they moved over and conquered Spain, Madame Bagiba has written a book on it that bears the name, Tariq bin Zayed. The Rock of Gibraltar is named after him. It's the hill or the mountain of Tariq. Gibraltar is a corruption of his name, Jabral. And she describes the army going into Spain. She says the army was black as ink. The general was blacker still. Meaning the general was the only one riding a white horse. So his blackness against that whiteness looked blacker than the rest of them. But the horse was better dressed than the kings of Europe, with silk and brocade. And the women taking off garments and throwing them in front of his horse, waving. I'd like to see Hollywood put this in Technicolor. Militarily, the Africans took over Spain, and militarily, the Africans held Spain until 1240, while the Arabs did come in. But the military hold on Spain was African. Now let's look at the Africans and the Arabs, that combination called Moors in Spain. What did they do? What did the Africans give to Islam? Why do you find a toleration between Christians and Arabs, Christians and Muslims in Spain that never existed before ever? It is the African spirituality. They coexisted with the Catholic Church side by side. They worked out a humane agreement. No mass killing. They built public schools. They built public baths. There's a chapter in John Jackson's Introduction to African Civilization called Africa and the Civilizing of Europe. You would do well to read it. That chapter alone is worth the price of the book. But there are many other books on the Africans and the Arabs in Spain. They gave Spain the greatest civilization it has known before or since. They built a great university, Salamanca. They translated the great works of the masters of Europe, including a lot of work they had stolen from Africa. Europe had forgotten its own masters. The Africans translated. It was the African that suggested that the Jews be appointed to the chairs in the mind sciences. God, what an error. All the ideology chairs. It was the Africans who took the Jews into Spain and made them the grandees, the money managers of Spain. And when the Africans lost power, some of them went Holland and found the Dutch East Indian and the Dutch West India Company became managers of the slave trade. People find no compunction of turning on us when it's to their convenience to do so. But their performance and the partnership between the Africans and the Arabs and the Berbers in Spain was a long and beneficial partnership and a fine moment in their history and in world history. The African and the Arab and Islam had united and held Europe at bay for almost 1,000 years. And when that partnership went bad, both of them were in trouble. By 1450, the Africans and the Arabs began to argue among themselves over nonsense at first. But 1240, the Portuguese had broken away from the Africans, but Spain was still under their domination. Then half of Spain, for 1455, had broken away, the Castilian part. And now they had colonial aspiration of their own. And they went to the Pope to discuss the matter. He was the leading authority of the world where Europe is concerned. Now they wanted a piece of the world. They wanted to start dividing up the world among themselves. And the Pope told them, you are both authorized to reduce to servitude all infidel people. In other words, you need not feel guilty about the slave trade that had already started along the coast of West Africa. The fact that there were great independent states inside of Africa is something I'll talk about later on. My main point here is that Islam had swept down into the Western Sudan. That a lot of people said the great states of Ghana, Mali, and Sangay were Muslim states. Ghana was never a Muslim state. In fact, Ghana was destroyed by Muslims. By Abu Bakr of the Susus. When he pulled his army out of Ghana to help his co-religionists in Spain, he died. Now, I'll be talking about these other states in more detail in another way. But what I'm concluding with is that the spread of Islam into the Western Sudan had brought a language, a sense of accounting, and a religion that had a fascination for the African. But now, the argument between the Africans and the Arabs, spoiling the performance they had, that almost 1,000-year performance that had been good not only for them but good for mankind. They had given North Africa some stability, and they had given the Western Sudan some stability. It came 1492, and the least significant event would be the so-called discovery of the New World. The greatest event in the history of that period would be really the Africans and the Arabs, collectively called Moors, would lose their hold on Spain and be pushed out. Be pushed out of Spain, and they would lose the Mediterranean. They had blocked Europe in the Mediterranean. They had forced Europe out of the Mediterranean, and they had forced Europe into the Middle Ages. Now Europe had discovered longitude and latitude. It had come out of its box. They'd gone back to sea. They had learned some maritime techniques from the school at Salamanca, that the Africans had translated the information from Spain. And they would turn on the very Africans who translated it for them and the very Arabs. The fight between the Africans and the Arabs would facilitate the rise of Europe. Except had the Africans and the Arabs got together at this point in history, fighting over various interpretations of Islam, they could have stopped Europe and stopped the slave trade, but instead of stopping the slave trade, the Arabs went into the slave trade, disgraced Islam, disgraced themselves, and left the African without protection, something which we should never forgive. And after this, the Africans, mixed Africans, Berbers, and Arabs in Morocco, soreheads, turned inward on Africa to rob the nations to the south. They recruited European mercenaries with modern weapons for that day, and with some guns supplied by Queen Elizabeth I, they invaded the Western Sudan, destroyed the great state of Sangay. In the long night that was to last 500 years had started, and the good that Islam had done was being spoiled. Now you had Muslim against Muslim facilitating the spread of the slave trade inland. I am saying that while this is one of the world's greatest religions, its redemption is going to come from Africans who will rescue it, give it a real meaning, make it a world religion, make it a world force for unity, and give it the sense of tolerance and respect for other cultures and religions that it once had, and integrate it into the concept of African culture, African liberation. Either do this or throw it into the ash can of history. Thank you.
Henrik Clarke.
They have decided to establish these clinics in which to dispense prescriptions and to supply birth control devices to kids. Now, I have spoken to various people in the Board of Education department, as they already said, and I sat down with the guy who's Director of Public Education and stuff like that. And I asked him to explain the policy, the reasons why, and so forth. And we sat down there for about half an hour. And this man could not give me a rational explanation of it. I mean, he is in charge of the program, and he did not even understand it, and he confessed as much. So it seems to me that what we've got here is very clearly an attempt to deal with a very serious issue in a very cosmetic way. And what we see in New York City are cosmetic ways of dealing with problems. Our leaders have no clue as to the solution of problems. Their way of dealing with the drug problem is to have a senator they're something like a drug addict or something like that, and buying some stuff in the Upper West Side. But the police commissioner's way of dealing is to transfer our cops once every 5 years. Their way of dealing with education of black children is to distribute birth control devices. So these people have seriously run out of ideas. They are intellectually bankrupt. Now, what we're going to do is this. We intend to do something about the problem, because it has nothing to do with the high teenage pregnancy rate of black children. Because it's true that the teenage pregnancy rate is high, but giving them condoms is not going to solve that problem. And we intend to bring a lawsuit, against the Board of Education on several grounds. First of all, that this policy that they're implementing is not very clear and precise. It violates their own standards. And secondly, and more important, that it is a violation of the rights of blacks. It has a discriminatory impact on black folks, since all of the clinics are located in black and Hispanic areas. If it was a great program, don't you think that it would have been in Canarsie and some of those places? Well, it's located in just a black area. I think it's a very good idea that it is not all that great as it's thought to be. So we intend to stop this type of action by bringing a lawsuit against them. And it's not only intended to stop this practice, but intended to force them to come up with a serious solution to the problem of black kids in the community. Because we are convinced that they have no clue as to the solution. And the only thing that is going to force them to do it is to stop this practice and then to seriously rethink about the problems of homelessness, crack, drugs, teenage pregnancies, and so forth. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask each and every one of you, if you can, to be there next Wednesday, at 6 o'clock at the public discussion, when each and every one of you can make a contribution. Because they feel that we have a way of just kind of bad talking, hey man, we don't like this and that. But when it comes to the real showdown, they say that they don't see too many of us there. So let us make our presence felt. It affects us, okay? It affects your kids. And make your presence felt at that Board of Education by being there next Wednesday at 6 p.m. 110 Livingston Street.
First floor, 110 Livingston Street. And just to reiterate and to bring some of you up to date, I don't know if it was mentioned, how well it was mentioned, but are we all aware of Mr. Mickett's situation over at Boys and Girls High? Alright, he's the principal over at Boys and Girls High. And a few days ago, he was walking down the hallway, he saw some of the young brothers with condoms blowing them up like balloons. And so he asked him, so where did you get that from? They said, we had it from the health clinic. So he went to the health clinic and he said, to stop distributing any more contraceptives until they can discern this program and evaluate it and find out what it's all about. And Robert Wagner, who's the president of the Board of Education, said he's going to make Frank Mickens an example by punishing him. Now, how they're going to do that, they have not explained yet, but they have targeted the brother. And what we want to do, part of what we want to do is to say to the Board of Education, you're not going to touch this brother. Alright? You're not going to let him touch this brother, because he also stated that one of the reasons why he was doing that was because the parents in his particular school were on his side, and they were encouraging him to take a stand, and that he was going to meet the needs of his constituency. So we have a brother who is courageous, a brother who is responsive to the people that he is accountable to. And we don't have too many of those type of brothers and sisters around. And when we find a brother like that, a diamond amongst us like that, we need to give him. All right, sister.
Dr. Clarke, who did you say made up the vandals, the people that you call the vandals?
They were Germans. They were what became Germans. They were Teutonics. Teutonic people, and they came out of what later became Germany. And their descendants can be seen in North Africa today. You occasionally in North Africa you see a jet black person, tall, with blue eyes, descendants of the Vandals.
Exactly who are the Arabs, or where did they come from?
They came from the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabs are really a mixture of people. They really